All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Nas Vou. Nas, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Really, really excited to be talking with you and really excited to be here. So thanks so much.
Yeah, same here. And I want to start by giving a shout out to Joe Marcoux because Joe was the one that connected you and I.
Yeah,
And I'll tell you what, Nas, when you get connected that way, but via somebody that you and I just both have so much respect, so much admiration for, and when a guy like Joe says, Nas and Kevin, you guys should make time to connect. And here's why I think you should do that. Man, that just carries a ton of weight. And
definitely.
and when you and I spoke for the first time, we just made an instant connection. And man, like you, I've been totally looking forward to having this conversation with you today and stuff, and being able to share it with a lot of other entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs. So what I want to do is I want to start. I just want to turn it over to you. Is what I want to
Yeah,
do.
please.
I'm going to kind of cover some broad stuff, and but I also I do that because I want to just kind of give you permission to go in the direction that feels right to you. But what I want to do to start with is I want to set some context and let
Cool.
folks know who you are and what you're all about. So let's share a little bit about, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work you do and the impact you're making, and also give us some of the backstory because that's the really good stuff too and stuff. So
For sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting that opening up that the can of worms. So I'm excited to go deep. So yeah, I appreciate that. First of all, yeah, my as you said, my name is Nas Vou. I'm originally from Australia by the accent. If you're listening to this, you can probably hear a little bit of a twang coming through there. Um, and I originally I grew up in Australia, and now I live in Cyprus, which is a very small little place on the Mediterranean coastline. Absolutely beautiful place. And my background, I work in digital marketing and specifically helping B2B businesses with their outbound and creating, setting appointments and creating leads for their business. So that's what I'm in the business of.
okay.
My backstory is originally come from a very corporate world. My first job was McDonald's, when I was like 14 years old. So that's like the real origins. I was always kind of ready to work even before I could. So when I was really young, I remember I was just trying to get into the workforce. I just wanted to be around. I don't know why, actually. I think I just wanted to make my own money, and have like my own kind of destiny in my hands. So I started working really young, and then worked into a few other like really big corporate companies. And then over the last kind of 8 years, I found myself journeying into entrepreneurship and started out initially coaching other individuals through like life coaching and sales coaching. My background was sales, and it
Okay.
kind of augmented into working with young men as a mentor. So I did various coaching roles, and then the last 2.5, 3 years have been very focused on agency. So kind of bringing the sales background experience into the marketing world, and then kind of combining those two together with, as I said, like outreach funnels, sales funnels, and everything to do with kind of people, businesses working in the B2B space who are wanting to reach their ICP, their ideal client, and how do they do that in a way that's not spammy, that's cool, that's authentic, and really fits their brand voice. And how do you do that in a way that at scale, where you can really get in front of the people that, the buyers and the people that, what you would say who can make impact on and really
Yeah.
help. So,
Yeah.
especially in a big crowded marketplace that we're in today with AI and a whole bunch of new products coming to market. It's a really exciting space, really exciting opportunity. So that's a little bit about like who I am, my backstory, and kind of
Yeah.
where I've landed from the
Yeah.
last time.
Very cool. So, what is an example of a result that you have helped a client or someone get that you are just incredibly proud of, Nas?
I think that's a good question. I think one of my clients, like we probably more down your realm. We started working. So we do websites as well. We started initially worked on his website,
Okay.
and we did one site. It was just like here's a consultant. and he was basically launching his business. He's had like 20 years experience in his industry as a like a fully fledged CEO, managing director, I should say. And so we started on this site, and then slowly we started to work on other projects. So he gave us a second project and a third project because he was an entrepreneur and he had many different businesses that he was working on. And then by the end of it, in the last kind of few months or 6 months, we actually became strategic partners, and we teamed up and we started offering outreach for his clients because we realized there was some kind of overlapping
Okay.
um, um, context. And so we kind of teamed up, and from a client that we just started working with as like in the website game, it can be a little bit transactional. You can have this aspect of like freelancers or agencies.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, that's probably what I'm most proud of, is actually turning a relationship from, you know, a a website into actually creating like a strategic partnership with them.
Yeah.
And now we are kind of their go-to provider for anything when it relates to marketing. We handle all of their projects. I've been introduced to many people through that one network. And for me, that's a really powerful example of strategic networking,
Yeah.
and also just power of relationships, which I know this podcast is all about. So that's like a really one that like I'm probably most proud of that, because I never expected, obviously you just try to do your best work whenever in whatever situation you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. You try to
Mm-hmm.
you try to innovate. I spend a lot of time with him, helping him kind of above and beyond with my team as well. So yeah, that was a really, really fun project, and it's become a relationship that's turned into a friendship, and it's moved leaps and
Now a
bounds from there.
partnership. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I love how that just organically unfolded that way. Is that, so you were providing service for this client, and he had such a great experience working with you guys that he's just kind of like, oh, you know what? I want to introduce you to my clients. And the beautiful thing, and I think what, because I've been doing strategic partnerships for, oh my gosh, for years. I know when I had my publishing company for 12 years, I did almost 500 strategic partnerships in a 12-year period stuff. And and the whole thing, the reason he's connecting you with his clients is, like I said, you gave him a great experience, but he's also like, you know what? Nas and his team, man, they're going to really help me for further the relationship that I've already got with my clients, because they gave me a great experience. They're going to give my clients the same great experience. And my clients are going to come back to me and go, wow, hey, thanks so much for connecting us with Nas. And that's the beautiful thing about this is that, yeah, there can be money exchange too. There can be, a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, they lead with the, hey, if you send me referrals, I'll give you a commission. And
Mm,
it's the wrong messaging, because that's not why we do it. We
yeah,
do it because we want to further the relationship with other people in our
for
lives that
sure.
we appreciate.
And to add there, like often you don't really want to be sending, I've done this in the past, and I don't really do it anymore, where you're sending referrals, people maybe you don't have a huge amount of contact with, or people that you have good contact. You want to know who you're sending them to and what they're about. So
Yeah,
when you develop like a strategic partnership, like almost you want to have worked with them, or have had other people like that you trust and know, because that reputation is your reputation by extension. So that's
absolutely.
something that if I refer, someone to Kevin, I want to know, well, I've had interactions with Kevin. I understand his character. I think you said this actually last week we spoke, and it's stuck in my mind, like trust of character and trust of competence,
Yes,
which is what
yes.
equals an ability to have trust in the individual, and to
Yeah.
do their job and to do what they're good at. I think you languaged it much more eloquently than I did, but I think that's the core message, and it really
Yeah.
stuck out with me, because that's a lot about how when you're building solid relationships and you're meeting people, and particularly like on LinkedIn, which is where I do a lot of networking and meet a lot of different people. Sometimes it's just soft networking, sometimes it's more like strategic, we're looking for services, or and vice versa. You really start to build like networks within networks that exist. And I really love that whole experience, because it really allows you to meet the characters and meet and understand the people that you're actually dealing with and interacting. And if you can trust them, there is a level of competence there, then they'll take care of that person that you're referring on, or that lead, or that you want to keep. That's an extension of your brand almost in a way. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And and that's just like a simple litmus test that I've been using all these years is when making introductions, when facilitating relationships and stuff. I'm always looking as like, okay, is the action that I'm about to take, will that help further the relationship that I've already got with this person or both of
mm,
these individuals? And just using that as a really simple litmus test, it just kind of keeps us on track and stuff.
yeah,
And so, man, I love hearing stories like that, Nas. So, okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set here, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit.
sure.
And so I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of our listeners. So, Nas, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Awesome. Yeah, I do have a story, as all good stories have. They should have a good ending. So I'll try to give you the full picture.
Yeah.
So it was a time where taking just adding a little bit of life context. I was really sick when I was younger. I had glandular fever. I was reflecting on this recently, and I was like totally. I was really young at this point, like just starting my career. So backstory, I left school when I was really young. I started to became a PT, and then I got really sick, and I kind of landed in this situation where I had chronic fatigue, and like I couldn't work. And for me not to be able to work, even at that, I was 18, 17, 18, even not to be able to work then for me was like, I need to be productive. I need to be useful. I need to be doing something or adding some sort of value. That's kind of how I've always been in a way. And so I worked a few different various jobs, and then I kind of cut my teeth in sales, and I always found meeting people was really exciting because you get to learn. I wasn't super interested in books, but I was super interested in people because I always noticed that people would you could learn a lot from people, and just by conversing. So I kind of sales was like a bit of a natural progression for me in my career. So I started working for a few different companies I mentioned earlier, and then I got to a position where I applied for a food and beverage manager role, and I was like really young at this point, and I was like 19, and I was going up against guys who were like 30. I was like, no, I can do this role. Like, you just got to be good with people. This was my thinking, and I interviewed really well, and I didn't get it. And what happened was I ended up getting the second in charge role, which
Okay.
for that age, I was like, okay, wow, you did something. And like looking back, I was like, wow, you were ambitious. Like, what made you think you could get that role? Right. But yeah, I got the second in charge. This guy in front of me got the role, and then about 3 months later, and he didn't cut the mustard for whatever reason, and I was promoted. So I
Wow.
initially got the role, which I originally tried to get, but I didn't. And then probably like 6 months later, a year later, I was working in this, and I was like, I wanted just to progress and keep improving. And then I made some really good relationships with the reps because I was in charge now of food and beverage, and I was in charge of what products would come into the store, what
Okay.
products would actually um, be sold, and what ranges. So I made really good relationships, and I just started asking them like, hey, like Coca-Cola was like a company that I would like. It's like, wow, Coca-Cola, it's a big company, right? Even today, it's one of the biggest companies in the world. Maybe this is like 15 years ago or so. So it had a huge reputation, obviously. And I met this guy, his name Ashen Cohen, and I asked him a couple of times, and I was like, hey, do you think how do I get a job at where you're working? Like, I'd really love to get interviewed, and it was pretty hard back then. Like, so coming back to my origin story, like I didn't have like a degree. I was just this kind of ambitious kind of sales guy, and at that time, I think they were just like hiring people with degrees. So I was like, hey, can you get me an interview, and then I'll kind of like take the rest of the way. So he managed to get me an interview, and he had to put his name out there, right? And this is what we were talking about before. He had to put his name out there to say, like, I'm referring this person for the role. So he's kind of putting his neck out.
Yep.
And yeah, long story short, I ended up getting the role, and I really think that was the first time like I had stepped into like a really corporate environment and a really
Right.
professional environment. And I think that's where I learned a lot of the core skills and core functions that have made me successful today, because they teach you incredible sales training. They have incredible like um, development programs, and and I ended up buying a house like a couple years later because I was young. I was living at home. I was making really good money for my age, and I was able to fund a property at like 22 years old, something like that, a couple of years in. So, and I always thank him. Actually, I still sometimes see him popping up on LinkedIn. This was a few years ago now, and I sent him a message like, "Hey man, thanks so much for putting your neck out, because if it wasn't for you, I probably wouldn't have been where I am today without
Yeah.
your referral, without your kind of backing." And he said some nice words back to me. I won an award actually at one point, and again I thanked him. I'm very thankful of for him, because yeah, I think without someone like that, and who can see what you want to do, but you need a bit of a chance to kind of get in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'm very thankful to Ashen if he ever listens to this
That is
for
so
the
awesome. So I want to dig a little deeper on this. And so what's an example? And you can probably come up with a number of them, but I just want to challenge you to come up with one. It'll probably just come up top of mind for you. So what's an example where you personally you got to make a really substantial impact, and maybe in the moment it even surprised you, where you're like, wow, look at just what happened there. And you also know that that would have never happened if not for the relationship that you had with Ash. What's an example of something like that, Nas?
well, I think so. Something that would have never have happened. I feel like that whole timeline that I told you about wouldn't have happened. I just feel
None
like
of
that
it.
time,
Yeah.
I just think back to that timeline. I just think it was a really difficult, like you very prestigious company to get in. I just don't think any of that would have happened. I almost like I'm struggling to find a very specific one. Like I reflect like if I hadn't met him, maybe I would have ended up in the same place, but in maybe a completely different way. Like I really think that experience um kind of propelled me forward a lot,
Yeah.
actually. Now thinking like I may have kind of continued to work there, or I may have tried to get a job with a different company. But like when you have like Coca-Cola, you know what I mean? Like that really big kind of company, like it can open a lot of doors. And I think that's kind of what it did for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can't really think of like one. I just feel like that whole timeline um kind of wouldn't be available to me. I also think like if I didn't do that then, like where everything may have just been shift back like 5, 10 years in a
Yeah.
way. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the thing I can kind of summarize in
Yeah.
a way.
It's really interesting to look back on, different relationships and different circumstances, things that have happened in our lifetime. And I mean, I think back to my relationship with Joe Polish, and that I met him
Mm,
30 years ago, when at the time I owned a cleaning and restoration company, a carpet cleaning company. And I've talked with Joe about this, because a lot of amazing things have come in my life because I had the opportunity to meet Joe, and I ended up hiring him, and a lot of things happened through that relationship. And so him and I have had that conversation about, man, what would it be like if I never met you? And his response was, well, Kevin, if you wouldn't have met me, you would have met somebody, because you were hungry and you were looking,
mm,
so
mm,
you would have
mm.
met somebody. But still, it's like, yeah, maybe, but I'm dang glad that I met you, man.
Yeah.
And so,
And
and
those people, like those particular people, they have such a profound impact. I think like you can,
Yeah.
it's so hard to kind of take that out and say, well, you would have met someone else. Like, you don't know, man. Like, you don't know what would have happened.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
it's like he was there for the right time and in the right moment. And
Yeah.
I guess there's that famous saying, like when the mentor, what is it? I'm gonna mix it up
When
when
the
the
student's ready, the
that's
teacher
right.
appears. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think that's a mindset almost as well. Like if you're ready to meet people and you're ready to transform, like it could be a book, it could be a piece of information. I think those kind of serendipity moments can happen in a lot of different ways, but through people, they're wonderful because you get to have that shared experience. And
Yeah.
I often kind of think like, I mean, imagine I said I posed this question to a few people, like imagine there's no one around ever. It's just you. What's the point? Like without people, nothing really matters. So,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in the future with AI, maybe it's all going to be different. I don't know.
I don't
But
know.
as long as we're around and as long as the humans are around, people will always need people in some capacity,
Yeah.
um, and need introductions and need someone to kind of give them a guidance or take them through the next process or introduce them to someone like today. So yeah, I really resonate with what you said with Joe and how that relationship can really open up
Yeah.
so many new avenues for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we are definitely in a very interesting time for sure. It's not just interesting, it's really fascinating. And you know what I know over the last 2, 3 years especially, I have watched just in my world a guy who's been focused on relationships for so long, just watch as relationships have just become more and more valuable. The right relationship, not just
Mm.
any old, but right relationships have become more and more valuable. And I just have this feeling, it just feels like that's going to continue to happen, you know. And with AI and all that, and I mean AI, man, I mean fascinating stuff happening there. It's amazing, and it's also kind of like maybe some of the stuff gives us pause too. It's like wow,
Mm.
and so, but I from what I'm seeing, it's like, I've just been doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on relationships, and the more that I lean into this and just being this connector and conduit of trust for the people in my life, man, it's pretty amazing what is happening. Like what we talked about, that trust in character and trust in competence. When those two trusts are there, there's zero friction. And things can just happen, and things can just flow, and it happens easily because those two trusts are in place. And there also needs to be alignment in interests and values too.
Mm.
But when we're aligned on all that, man, just stand back because fireworks are about to happen, and
Yeah, I
it's
think
so cool to see.
you talk about Joe Polish, right? I think that school. I think you mentioned Jim Rohn as well in the past when we
Yeah,
first spoke.
yeah,
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 I kind of came through. It's probably another person that I owe a lot of kind of credit for. I think Tony Robbins and the way he in communities how he's able to bring I think for anything you want to say bad about any of these people because I'm sure you can find bad there. I don't have anything bad to say personally, but if there's only one thing you took away from like any kind of course or any information places, the community when the people come together, because you end up meeting people that are doing really incredible things
yeah,
and they can give you so much more leverage and also give you some and also you can do the same for them. I'm talking from a first person perspective. Like they can open up a whole new world for you. And I think that community aspect, you talk about relationships, like communities allows you to do that on a bit of a scale.
yeah,
Whereas like this one-to-one and introducing people, which we've already started to do, you and I, to other people to kind of open up different circles that people would never have had access to. So like to give an example, like I met Craig Ballantyne. I had him on my podcast and I had a couple of other guests on my podcast, and then eventually, like, I think it's like you're the fourth or fifth person from that one kind of conversation I had. It was a 30-minute, not even 30-minute conversation, it was like a 26-minute conversation. And I met four really amazing, like Joe, yourself, his head coach, and there was one more. Excuse, I forget the name, but yeah, just from one conversation,
Yeah.
man. Like it really opened up. And I'm in Cyprus, you're in North America. We're on like completely different sides of
Different
the world,
planes.
the different planes. Like, but we can still interact and still
Yeah.
connect and still find a way to, share common ground through what you
Yeah.
said is through the values. And I think that's kind of going back to my original point is that with values, I think that's what these Joe Polishers and the Jim Rohns and the Tony Robbins they hit home a lot about it because it's such an essential part of their ethos when they
Yeah.
train. Is like,
Yeah.
what are your values? What are your personal values?
Yeah.
Trust, transparency, honesty, respect, and then obviously feeding into like what are your business values and are your personal values shining through in your business? And I feel like people who you meet who have that level of access or who've had access to these rooms like you and I have, they think about relationships in a much more richer way than say people who haven't. That's
Yeah.
just and or who are. I just feel like there's that level of maturity in a way is more talked about. They're more conscious about the values and
Yeah.
principles
Yeah.
versus people who haven't gone through that. They're not so much so trying to sell Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins. I don't think they need any help with that, but they've been amazing. They've been amazing for a bit from a business standpoint and a
Yeah.
human standpoint for me.
For sure. For sure. Well, Nas, I really want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. And for anybody who's listening to this right now, going, man, Kev, I really like Nas. I love the way he shows up, and maybe they're interested in getting to know a little bit more about what you do, and any resources, any websites we can share with them and include with the
Yeah, for sure.
podcast here.
For sure. Yeah, I can share my website. It's www.doitdigital.agency.
Okay.
And you can also find me on LinkedIn, which is where I'm most active. I also post relatively regular content on there for like strategies and share kind of that's where I'm most active and most found on. And I have a podcast as well, which is called CEO Insights. You can find it on Spotify, YouTube, I think Apple as well. You'll be able to find it
Okay.
on there. So I should share all those links with you.
Absolutely. We'll make sure to include all that. Absolutely. Well, Nuts, any last thing you feel led to share before we call it a wrap today?
Um, Probably just doubling down on, I think for me, I think having this chat is also quite cathartic because you get to look back a little bit on, where you've come from in a way. And so I think for me, it's probably just, I guess, if I can give some advice to people who are already listening, obviously really value relationships, but maybe a question is like for myself and for the listeners, like how can you deepen your existing relationships that you have already? That you have around you? How can you nurture? Because I think sometimes, in my experience, moving country is actually quite challenging in a way when you're removed from different networks and you're used to being in certain circles and then you're not anymore. That's been a bit of my experience. So, how can you continually deepen those connections and relationships through kind of consistent conversations? So,
Yeah.
I guess that's a question that I'll take away for myself and also for anyone else who's
Yeah.
listening.
That's awesome. Well, Nas, once again, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for taking the time to have this conversation today. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you. And I'm excited to get it out there and share with a lot of other entrepreneurs. So thanks again.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate having me on. Cheers.
Absolutely.